You mean to tell me that humans regularly consume a neurotoxin for pleasure? Professor Zixtal's anterior appendages waved in what his species considered extreme distress. His iridescent scales flickered between shades of green and blue as he addressed the class of interspecies xenology students. Actually, Professor, came the calm voice of Lieutenant James Rodriguez, the human exchange officer assigned to the Galactic Academy of Xenological Studies. We consume several different neurotoxins for pleasure. The one you're referring to, caffeine, is just the most common. The classroom erupted in a cacophony of various alien vocalizations expressing shock, horror, and fascination. A Meridian student, their crystalline form catching the light in prismatic patterns, raised what passed for a hand. But Lieutenant, wouldn't that classify Earth as a Class X death world? The database lists it as merely Class C. James couldn't help but smile, taking a long, deliberate sip from his steaming coffee mug. The action caused several students to recoil. That's actually why I'm here today. The Galactic Council is reviewing Earth's classification, and they've asked me to provide some context. He set down his mug and pulled up a holographic display. You see, what makes Earth unique isn't just our tolerance for toxins. It's our entire evolutionary history. We're what you might call evolutionary stress testers. A Vordanian student, their floating gas sacs pulsing with curiosity, chimed in. Is it true that humans deliberately inject themselves with weakened pathogens as a preventative measure? Vaccines? Oh yeah, we do that all the time. It's actually one of our less extreme medical practices. James grinned, knowing what was coming next. Wait until you hear about how we deliberately expose ourselves to radiation to kill dangerous cells in our bodies, or how we literally cut ourselves open to fix internal problems. Professor Zixtal's scales shifted to a pale yellow, a sign of academic interest overriding his initial horror. Fascinating. But surely these are recent developments. Surely primitive humans didn't. Oh, primitive humans were even more metal. Sorry, I mean impressive. James corrected himself, though the translator had already rendered metal in various contextually appropriate ways to each species. We used to perform surgery while the patient was fully conscious. We discovered most of our early medicines by literally eating random plants to see what happened. And get this. We used to drill holes in our skulls to release evil spirits. The classroom fell silent, processing this information. An exilian student, their quantum probability field fluctuating wildly, finally spoke up. But how did your species survive long enough to achieve spaceflight? James leaned back against the desk, crossing his arms. That's the thing about humans. We're not just survivors. We're adapters. Everything that tries to kill us either makes us stronger or becomes our next tool. Take fire, for instance. Most species discovered it and ran away. We looked at it and thought, hey, what if we used this deadly force of destruction to make our food taste better? You deliberately burn your sustenance? A horrified whisper came from somewhere in the back. Cooking is just the beginning, James continued, warming to his subject. We discovered that certain types of toxic fungi could be cultivated to create delicious foods. We learned that fermenting perfectly good drinks until they became technically poisonous made them more enjoyable. We even figured out how to take the most dangerous substances in our environment and turn them into medicine. Professor Zixtal's scales had shifted to a deep purple, the color of profound revelation. Lieutenant, are you suggesting that humans' classification as merely Class C was due to the fact that we've gotten so good at dealing with deadly things that we've turned them into everyday conveniences? Exactly. James picked up his coffee again. Think about it. We live in houses made of processed poison wood. We wear clothes made from the destroyed remains of various organisms. We season our food with chemicals that evolved specifically to cause pain, and we do it all so casually that we barely notice anymore. A Meridian student's crystalline form vibrated in what might have been nervous laughter. So when humans say they're dying for a coffee, they're being literal? Technically, yes, James chuckled. Though the dose of caffeine needed to actually kill a human is way higher than what's in this cup. We've built up quite a tolerance over the years. That's another thing about humans. We don't just survive deadly things, we get bored with them and look for new challenges. Is that why humans engage in recreational activities that simulate near-death experiences? The Vordanian student's gas sacs had turned a curious shade of mauve. Ah, you mean sports and extreme activities? Yeah, we call that fun. Jumping out of perfectly good aircraft, climbing frozen waterfalls, swimming with predators, it's all part of how we relax. The quantum probability field of the Nexilian student had stabilized into a pattern that indicated deep thought. This explains much about human history. Your species doesn't just survive adversity. You actively seek it out and domesticate it? James snapped his fingers and pointed at the student. Exactly. Take dogs, for instance. We looked at some of the most efficient predators in our environment and decided to make them our friends. Now they're so integrated into our society that we get sad when they don't want to sleep in our beds. You share sleeping quarters with reformed predators? Professor Zixtal's scales cycled through several colors rapidly. Reformed is a strong word, James mused. They're still predators. We just gave them better toys and convinced them that hunting for sport is more fun than hunting for food. Actually, that's a pretty good metaphor for humanity in general. We don't really tame dangerous things. We just redirect them into more constructive outlets. A new student, a Helixian with spiral patterns rotating thoughtfully across their surface, raised an appendage. Is this why human diplomatic protocols are so unusual? Because you treat everything as potentially beneficial? Now you're getting it, James beamed. We have this saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. It's not just about warfare, it's about understanding. Everything that could kill us is also something we could potentially learn from or use. Professor Zixtal had finally regained his composure, his scales settling into the deep blue of academic discourse. This would suggest that the traditional classification system is inadequate for evaluating Earth. We measure planetary danger by how many ways it can kill its inhabitants, but humans. We measure planetary danger by how many ways we haven't figured out to make it work for us yet, James finished. That's why Earth's classification keeps causing confusion. You look at a planet with extreme temperature variations, aggressive predators, natural disasters, and toxic substances, and you see a death world. We look at the same thing and see a challenge, an opportunity, or worst-case scenario. Dinner ingredients. The classroom erupted in nervous laughter, which quickly died down as they realized James wasn't joking. Consider this, he continued, pulling up another holographic display. Every single one of your species evolved on worlds that were, by your standards, perfectly safe. Minimal temperature variations, few predators, stable geology, limited toxic substances. But that safety came with a cost. When you encountered anything outside your normal parameters, it was potentially lethal. He switched the display to show Earth's geological and biological history. Humans, on the other hand, evolved on a world that tried to kill us in a new way every Tuesday. We survived ice ages, supervolcanoes, meteor impacts, and countless diseases. We didn't just survive them, we studied them, documented them, and figured out how to predict them. And then, because that wasn't challenging enough, we started figuring out how to prevent or control them. A Meridian student's crystalline form sparkled with sudden understanding. So when humans say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It's not just a saying, it's literally our evolutionary strategy. James confirmed. Every threat we overcome becomes a tool in our arsenal. Every poison becomes potential medicine. Every predator becomes a potential ally. Every disaster becomes a lesson in prevention and control. Professor Zixtal's scales had settled into a shade of deep gold, the color of profound academic excitement. Lieutenant, would you say this is why humans have adapted so quickly to interstellar society? Because you're essentially treating it as just another potentially hostile environment to master? James considered this for a moment, taking another sip of his coffee. I'd say it's more that we're treating it as another opportunity to learn and grow. Yes, we're aware of the potential dangers. We'd be idiotic not to be. But we're more interested in the possibilities. Every new alien species we meet is a chance to learn new ways of thinking, new technologies, new approaches to problems we might not even have encountered yet. Even when those species are initially hostile. The Vordanian student's gas sacs pulsed with curiosity. Especially then, James grinned. Nothing teaches you more about someone than trying to figure out why they want to kill you, and how to turn that into a productive dialogue instead. It's like I said, we don't just survive threats, we try to understand them and make them work for us. The classroom fell silent again, but this time it was a thoughtful silence rather than a horrified one. Finally, Professor Zixtal spoke up. I believe I understand now why the Galactic Council is reviewing Earth's classification. It's not just about the planetary conditions or the species' resilience. It's about the unique approach humans take to hostile environments and situations. You don't just survive them, you actively engage with them, study them, and repurpose them. Exactly. James nodded. And that's why the current classification system doesn't really work for Earth. You can't measure Earth's danger level by how many ways it can kill its inhabitants, because humans have turned most of those deadly aspects into advantages. We're not just surviving our death world, we're thriving on it, and we're using everything we learned there to help us thrive in the galaxy at large. He gestured to his coffee cup. This isn't just a neurotoxin we consume for pleasure. It's a symbol of how humans approach everything. We take something potentially dangerous, figure out exactly how it affects us, and then use it to improve our lives. The fact that we can do this casually, every day, without even thinking about it anymore, that's what makes Earth special. The Nexilian student's quantum probability field had stabilized into a pattern indicating acceptance of a new paradigm. So when the Council reviews Earth's classification, they'll need to create an entirely new category, James concluded. Because Earth isn't just a death world. It's a world that taught its inhabitants to turn death into life, danger into opportunity, and threats into tools. And that, more than anything else, is what makes humans unique in the galaxy. As the class ended and the students filed out, still discussing this new perspective, Professor Zixtal approached James. Lieutenant, I must admit, when the Council first suggested this lecture series, I was skeptical. But now I understand. It's not just about reclassifying Earth. It's about understanding how Earth's conditions created a species that doesn't just face challenges, but actively seeks them out as opportunities for growth. James finished his coffee with a satisfied smile. Professor, would you like to know something really interesting? Everything I just told your class? That's only scratching the surface. Wait until you hear about how we turned our planet's deadliest predators into internet celebrities. The professor's scales shifted to a color James had never seen before. Perhaps that should be the subject of our next lecture. Deal, James grinned. But first, want to try some coffee? I brought enough to share. The professor's scales rippled with what might have been either terror or excitement, possibly both, and that, James thought, was perhaps the most human reaction of all. The next week's Xenology class started with Professor Zixtal still displaying slightly queasy scale patterns after his first, and likely last, experience with coffee. Nevertheless, his academic curiosity had overcome his physiological objections, leading to today's promised topic. Lieutenant Rodriguez, the professor managed, his scales finally settling into their normal scholarly blue. You mentioned something about humans turning apex predators into, what was the term? Internet celebrities? James activated the holographic display, which immediately filled with images of cats, from tiny kittens to majestic tigers. Welcome to one of humanity's greatest achievements, convincing the galaxy's most efficient killing machines to pose for pictures. A Meridian student's crystalline form caught the light in a way that somehow conveyed confusion. Those small ones? They are predators? Domestic cats. They're literally responsible for the extinction of several species on Earth, James explained cheerfully. They kill for fun, play with their prey before killing it, and have been known to bring their still-living victims to their human families as gifts. They're absolutely adorable. The classroom erupted in that now familiar mixture of horror and fascination that James had come to expect when discussing Earth's peculiarities. But why would you keep such creatures in your homes? The Vordanian student's gas sacs had contracted in distress. Well, that's the interesting part, James said, switching the display to show various cat videos. We didn't exactly plan it. They sort of invited themselves in when we invented agriculture and needed help controlling rodent populations. But then something fascinating happened. We discovered they were not just useful, but entertaining. And when we invented the internet, well... He gestured to the endless stream of cat content floating in the air. Professor Zixtal's scales shifted to a curious purple. You're suggesting that humans transformed lethal predators into entertainment through documentation? Not just documentation, James corrected, pulling up social media feeds. We created entire platforms dedicated to sharing pictures and videos of these predators being cute. We turned their hunting instincts into games. We built entire industries around their care and comfort. And then we did the same thing with practically every other predator we could find. The holographic display shifted to show various wildlife photographers at work, often in dangerously close proximity to their subjects. These humans. An Exilian student's probability field fluctuated with concern. They are aware that they are within striking distance of these creatures. Oh, absolutely, James grinned. That's kind of the point. We call it wildlife photography, and it's considered both an art form and a science. These photographers will spend days, weeks, or even months learning about their subjects, understanding their behaviors, and getting close enough to document them, all while trying not to become lunch. And this is entertainment? The Helixian's spiral patterns were rotating rapidly in what might have been disbelief. Entertainment, education, and conservation all rolled into one, James confirmed. See, we figured out that the best way to protect something is to make people care about it. And the best way to make people care about something is to show them how fascinating it is. Even if, or maybe especially if, it could kill them. He switched the display again, this time showing various social media influencers interacting with traditionally dangerous animals. We've got people who specialize in handling venomous snakes, others who swim with sharks, some who work with big cats, all sharing their experiences online for millions of viewers. But why? Professor Zixtal's scales had shifted to a shade that indicated genuine bafflement. Because it's cool, James said simply, then caught himself. I mean, it serves multiple purposes. First, it helps people understand these animals better, which leads to better conservation efforts. Second, it demonstrates that even the most dangerous creatures aren't mindlessly aggressive. They have complex behaviors and personalities. And third, well, humans just really like showing off. He pulled up another set of images, this time showing various cute edits of predator photos. We've actually gotten to the point where we actively infantilize some of Earth's most dangerous creatures. We add captions to their pictures like they're talking in baby speak. We give them silly nicknames. We make them into memes. Memes? The entire class asked almost in unison, their various biological and energy patterns expressing collective confusion. Oh boy, James muttered, then louder. That's probably a topic for another lecture, but the short version is that we take images, often of dangerous things, and make them funny through shared cultural context and repetition. The Meridian student's crystalline form vibrated in what might have been laughter. So humans not only domesticate predators, they also make fun of them? Pretty much, James agreed. But here's the really interesting part. This approach has actually helped us understand these creatures better. By observing them closely enough to document them, by interacting with them regularly enough to understand their behaviors, we've learned more about them than we ever did when we were just trying to avoid or kill them. Professor Zixtal's scales had shifted to that deep gold of academic excitement again. This appears to be another example of the human tendency to transform threats into opportunities for advancement. Exactly. James switched the display to show various scientific studies based on social media documentation of wildlife. We've actually made legitimate scientific discoveries through people posting videos of their pets online. We've identified new behaviors, documented previously unknown species interactions, and even tracked population movements, all because humans can't resist sharing pictures of dangerous things being cute. The Nexilian student's probability field had stabilized into its processing new information pattern. So, when humans encounter something dangerous, their first instinct is not to avoid it, but to document it? Well, first we try to figure out if it's going to kill us immediately, James clarified. If not, then yeah, out come the cameras. And if it is going to kill us immediately, we'll probably try to get footage of that too, just for posterity. The class stared at him in silence. I'm joking, he added. Mostly. The point is, this approach, turning dangerous things into entertainment and education, has actually been incredibly successful for us. It's helped us preserve species that we might otherwise have wiped out. It's helped us understand our environment better. And it's helped us maintain a healthy respect for dangerous creatures while also appreciating them. He switched the display one final time, showing a series of conservation success stories. These are all species that were once considered nothing but threats to human safety. Now they're protected, studied, and yes, turned into social media stars. Because that's what humans do. We don't just adapt to dangerous things, we make them part of our culture. And this approach, Professor Zixtal ventured, his scales shifting thoughtfully. You believe it could be applied to interstellar relations? It already is, James pointed out. Look at what we're doing right now. We're taking all these potentially dangerous differences between species and turning them into educational content. We're documenting our interactions, sharing them widely, and yes, probably making memes about them somewhere. The class broke into various species versions of laughter, the tension finally breaking. So, James concluded. When you see humans apparently being cavalier about dangerous situations, remember, we're not ignoring the danger. We're just really, really good at turning it into content. And sometimes, that's the first step toward turning it into understanding. As the class ended, Professor Zixtal approached James again, his scales still showing that fascinating shade of gold. "Lieutenant, I believe I owe you an apology," he said. "When you first suggested this topic, I thought it was frivolous, but I see now that it's actually a perfect example of how humans approach the galaxy, finding ways to make the dangerous approachable, the frightening understandable, and the alien relatable." James smiled. "Thanks, Professor. Though I should warn you, someone definitely recorded you trying coffee last week, and I'm pretty sure it's already gone viral on at least 3 planets." The professor's scales cycled through several colors rapidly, before settling on what might have been resignation. "I suppose that makes me an internet celebrity now?" "Welcome to the human experience, Professor," James laughed. "Don't worry, I'm sure the memes will be tasteful." The professor's scales shifted to a new color entirely, one that James suspected might be the alien equivalent of a facepalm. "Today," Professor Zixtal announced, his scales displaying a notably composed academic blue, "we will discuss what Lieutenant Rodriguez describes as extreme weather tourism." The professor's scales briefly flickered to a concerned yellow before steadying again. "Lieutenant, if you would?" James stood before the class, barely containing his enthusiasm. "Who here has heard of storm chasers?" The classroom remained silent, though several students' various biological indicators showed signs of interest. "Well," James continued, activating the holographic display to show footage of massive tornado systems. "On Earth, we have these weather phenomena called tornadoes. They're essentially rotating columns of air that can reach speeds of up to 300 miles per hour, capable of lifting houses, cars, and unfortunately, any living creatures in their path." The Meridian student's crystalline form vibrated in what had become recognizable as alarm. "And humans? Chase these phenomena?" "Not only do we chase them," James grinned, "we've turned it into both a scientific pursuit and an entertainment industry. We have specialized vehicles equipped with meteorological instruments. We have teams of researchers and photographers who follow these storms, and we even make documentary films about it." Professor Zixtal's scales shifted to that now familiar shade of academic fascination. "This appears to be another example of humans transforming natural threats into opportunities for study?" "Exactly!" James switched the display to show various storm-chasing vehicles and equipment. "But here's where it gets really interesting. We don't just study these phenomena. We've developed ways to predict them, track them, and even use them to better understand our planet's climate systems. And because we're human, we've also figured out how to make money from people who want to experience them firsthand." The Vordanian student's gas sacs pulsed rapidly. "You permit civilians to approach these destructive forces?" "Permit," James laughed. "We sell tickets. There are companies that organize storm-chasing tours. People pay good money to get as close as safely possible to tornadoes, hurricanes, and other extreme weather events." "But surely this is a specialized pursuit." The Nexilian student's probability field fluctuated hopefully. "Not a common recreational activity?" James switched the display again, this time showing various extreme weather tourism activities. "Well, storm chasing is relatively specialized, yes. But humans will travel across the planet to experience all sorts of potentially dangerous weather conditions. We ski down mountains during blizzards. We surf during tropical storms. We hike through deserts in the middle of summer." "Lieutenant," Professor Zixtal interrupted, his scales showing genuine concern. "Are you suggesting that humans deliberately seek out adverse environmental conditions for entertainment?" "Oh, it gets better," James said, pulling up more images. "We've actually developed entire sports around challenging weather conditions. Take ice climbing, for instance. Not content with just climbing frozen water, which is already pretty wild when you think about it. We specifically wait for the worst possible weather conditions to do it. The more hostile the environment, the more prestigious the climb." The classroom erupted in various expressions of disbelief and confusion. "But why?" The Helixian spiral patterns were spinning so fast they were almost a blur. What possible benefit could come from such unnecessary risk? James paused thoughtfully. "You know, that's actually a really good question. I think it comes back to what we discussed in our first session. Humans don't just adapt to hostile environments. We actively engage with them. By studying these extreme conditions up close, by learning to predict them and work with them rather than just avoid them, we've gained a much deeper understanding of our planet's systems. He switched the display to show various scientific achievements that had resulted from extreme weather research. Every time we chase a storm, every time we climb an ice wall, every time we surf a massive wave, we're not just doing it for fun. We're gathering data, testing equipment, developing new safety protocols, and pushing the boundaries of what we understand about our environment. Professor Zixtal's scales had settled into a contemplative purple. This suggests that human recreational activities often serve multiple purposes: entertainment, scientific advancement, and technological innovation simultaneously. Exactly, James beamed. Take tsunami research, for example. We literally send ships out into the ocean during major storms to study wave patterns. And yes, some of that research has led to better surfing techniques and equipment, but it's also helped us develop better early warning systems and coastal protection measures. He pulled up another set of images, this time showing various weather monitoring stations and defense systems. We've basically turned our planet's attempts to kill us into a comprehensive planetary monitoring system. Every major weather event is tracked, studied, and analyzed. We've got satellites watching storm formations, buoys measuring ocean temperatures, and sensors monitoring seismic activity. All because we refuse to just accept that sometimes nature tries to wipe us out. The Meridian student's crystalline form caught the light in what had become recognizable as deep thought. So when humans encounter destructive natural phenomena, their response is to study it until they can predict and potentially control it? Well, control might be a bit strong, James admitted. But we've certainly gotten better at understanding and working with these forces rather than just trying to avoid them. We seed clouds to produce rain in drought-stricken areas. We use controlled burns to prevent larger forest fires. We're even working on ways to deflect hurricanes, though that's still mostly theoretical. And yet, Professor Zixtal observed, his scales showing a mix of colors that suggested both admiration and concern. Humans continue to build settlements in areas prone to these extreme weather events? Oh yeah, James nodded. We call them disaster-prone areas, and some of our biggest cities are built right on fault lines, in tornado alleys, or along hurricane-vulnerable coastlines. But here's the thing. Instead of abandoning these areas, we've developed increasingly sophisticated ways to cope with the risks. He brought up images of various disaster response systems and infrastructure. We've got buildings designed to withstand earthquakes, storm shelters that can survive direct tornado hits, sea walls that protect against tsunamis. We're constantly innovating new ways to coexist with these dangers, rather than just avoiding them. The Nexilian students' probability field had stabilized into what James now recognized as their version of fascination. This appears to be a recurring pattern in human behavior. The transformation of natural threats into opportunities for advancement. It's kind of our specialty, James agreed. But there's something else important to understand here. All this weather chasing and disaster studying has led to something even more significant. A global cooperation network for dealing with natural disasters. He switched the display one final time, showing various international disaster response teams in action. When a major weather event hits anywhere on Earth, you'll find humans from all over the planet rushing toward the danger rather than away from it. We've turned our species' weird fascination with dangerous weather into a worldwide support system. Professor Zixtal's scales had shifted to that deep gold of profound academic insight. Lieutenant, are you suggesting that Earth's hostile environment has actually fostered cooperation among humans? Nothing brings people together quite like trying to figure out how to survive the next natural disaster, James confirmed. And now that we're out here in the galaxy, we're hoping to share what we've learned. After all, every planet has its own environmental challenges, right? The classroom fell into thoughtful silence, broken only by the soft sounds of various species taking notes or recording the lecture. As the class ended, Professor Zixtal approached James with an unusually complex pattern playing across his scales. Lieutenant, I believe we may need to add another category to our classification of Earth's unique aspects. The human capacity to turn environmental hostility into social cohesion. James smiled. Professor, wait until next week's lecture on extreme sports. You haven't seen anything yet. The professor's scales briefly flashed to alarm before settling into resigned curiosity. I suspect I should prepare myself for more examples of humans deliberately seeking out danger. Oh no, James grinned. Next week is about how we invented new ways to make perfectly safe situations dangerous for fun. Trust me, storm chasing is just the beginning. The professor's scales shifted to a color James had never seen before. one that somehow managed to convey both dread and eager anticipation. And really, James thought, that was probably the most appropriate response to any discussion of human recreational activities. Professor Zixtal's scales displayed a complex pattern of anticipation and concern as he addressed the class. Today's lecture, as promised by Lieutenant Rodriguez, will cover the human propensity for creating artificial dangers in the pursuit of recreation. James stepped forward, activating the holographic display. Thank you, Professor. Today we're going to discuss what happens when humans decide that natural dangers aren't quite exciting enough, so we invent new ones. The display showed images of various extreme sports equipment, mountain bikes, wingsuit gear, parkour obstacles, and race cars. The alien students exhibited their species equivalent expressions of bewilderment. Lieutenant, the Meridian student's crystalline form pulsed with confusion. Are you suggesting that despite Earth's numerous natural hazards, humans deliberately engineer additional dangerous situations? Precisely, James confirmed, zooming in on a particularly complex mountain bike course. Take this, for example. We looked at perfectly normal hills and mountains and thought, you know what would make this more interesting? If we built narrow wooden platforms 40 feet in the air and rode bikes across them at high speed. Professor Zixtal's scales shifted to a pale yellow of academic curiosity. This appears to be more than simple thrill-seeking behavior. There seems to be a systematic approach to creating these challenges. Absolutely right, James agreed, switching the display to show the engineering behind various extreme sports venues. We've developed entire industries around designing, testing, and standardizing artificial dangers. We have safety protocols, professional organizations, and international competitions, all centered around activities we invented specifically to be dangerous. The Vordanian students' gas sacks contracted nervously. But surely these activities are limited to a small subset of particularly risk-tolerant individuals? James laughed, bringing up statistics on extreme sports participation. You'd think so, but no. Every year, millions of humans participate in activities like bungee jumping, where we tie elastic cords to our ankles and jump off high platforms, or skydiving, where we jump out of perfectly functional aircraft, and these are considered relatively mainstream activities. Mainstream? The Nexilian student's probability field fluctuated wildly. What would humans consider extreme? Well, James grinned, switching the display to show various extreme sports. There's proximity wingsuit flying, where people put on suits that let them glide through the air and then fly as close as possible to cliff faces and through narrow canyons. Or free soloing, where climbers scale sheer cliff faces without any safety equipment. Or cave diving, where people explore underwater cave systems with limited visibility and air supply. The classroom erupted in various expressions of horror and fascination. But the really interesting part, James continued, is how these activities drive innovation. Every new extreme sport we invent leads to advancements in materials science, safety equipment, medical treatment, and emergency response protocols. We're essentially using our desire for controlled danger to push the boundaries of human capability and technological development. Professor Zixtal's scales had shifted to that now familiar shade of academic revelation. So these seemingly irrational pursuits serve a broader purpose in human advancement? Exactly, James confirmed, pulling up examples of technological innovations derived from extreme sports. The materials we developed for protective gear are now used in everything from spacecraft to medical devices. Our understanding of human physiology under extreme conditions has improved dramatically. Even our emergency response systems have evolved to handle increasingly complex scenarios. The Helixian's spiral patterns rotated thoughtfully. This suggests that humans not only adapt to danger but actively create it as a means of controlled evolution. That's actually a fascinating way to look at it, James acknowledged. We're essentially creating artificial selection pressures for both our technology and our capabilities. Every time we invent a new dangerous activity, we have to develop new ways to make it survivable. He switched the display to show the progression of safety equipment over time. Look at how motorcycle protective gear has evolved. We started with leather jackets and basic helmets. Now we have airbag suits that deploy in milliseconds, impact-absorbing materials that stiffen on contact, and helmets with heads-up displays and emergency beacon systems. And humans consider this entertainment? The Meridian student's crystalline structure sparkled with what might have been disbelief. Entertainment, competition, and sometimes just personal challenge, James explained. We have this concept called pushing the envelope, continuously testing and expanding the limits of what's possible. Sometimes that means climbing higher mountains or diving deeper into oceans, but sometimes it means inventing entirely new ways to challenge ourselves. He brought up footage of various parkour practitioners navigating urban environments. Take parkour, for instance. We looked at our cities, which we built specifically to be safe and easy to navigate, and decided to create a sport around finding the most dangerous and difficult ways to move through them. Professor Zixtal's scales displayed a complex pattern that suggested both admiration and concern. Lieutenant, would you say this tendency to manufacture danger is related to humanity's evolutionary history on a death world? That's a fascinating question, James responded thoughtfully. I think it might be the other way around. Our ability to survive on a death world might come from this fundamental drive to challenge ourselves. We're not just good at dealing with danger because we evolved on a dangerous planet. We might have survived on a dangerous planet because we're fundamentally drawn to testing our limits. The display shifted to show various training facilities and simulation centers. Look at how we practice for these activities. We build artificial environments specifically designed to be challenging and dangerous, but in controlled ways. We create progressive difficulty levels, safety systems, and training protocols. We're essentially treating recreational danger the same way we treat any other field of human endeavor, with systematic study, standardization, and continuous improvement. But why? The Vordanian student's gas sacs pulsed with genuine curiosity. What drives humans to constantly seek new forms of danger? James paused, considering the question carefully. I think it's because we understand something fundamental about danger. It's not just a threat. It's an opportunity to learn and grow. Every time we face a new challenge, whether natural or artificial, we come out of it with new knowledge, new capabilities, and new ideas for even more interesting challenges. He switched the display one final time, showing a montage of humans participating in various extreme sports, their faces showing everything from intense concentration to pure joy. This isn't just about thrill-seeking. It's about pushing boundaries, testing limits, and most importantly, doing it in a way that advances our understanding and capabilities. Professor Zixtal's scales had settled into that deep gold of profound academic insight. Lieutenant, I believe we may need to revise our understanding of human relationship with danger entirely. It's not merely adaptation or survival. It's active engagement and deliberate cultivation. As the class ended, the professor approached James with an unusually complex color pattern playing across his scales. Lieutenant, next week's topic? Oh, you're going to love this, James grinned. We're going to talk about how humans turn all of these dangerous activities into family entertainment. Ever heard of a theme park? The professor's scales cycled through several colors before settling on what James had come to recognize as resigned fascination. I suspect I should prepare myself for more examples of humans finding ways to make danger accessible to the general public. Professor, James smiled. Wait until you hear about roller coasters. We basically invented machines specifically to simulate near-death experiences, and we let children ride them. The professor's scales shifted to an entirely new color, one that somehow managed to convey both academic excitement and parental concern. And really, James thought, that was probably the most appropriate response to humanity's relationship with manufactured danger.